Welcome to the Rise with Rose podcast. This is your host, Rose, and today I'm going to talk to you about 5 ways to avoid an argument with your partner. So I'm bringing this up because I know we've all been there when we talk to our partner, we interact with them. Maybe it's at the end of the day, maybe it's after you haven't seen them for a while, and you talk to them and you just notice that their mood is off. You notice that they're in a negative space right off the bat. And it could be a situation where you're in a really good mood and you're wanting to have a good interaction with your partner. You come home and you just want to talk about your day, or you want to call them, and they're already starting to criticize every little thing that you're doing. They're starting to nitpick at things. They're starting to pick at you over things that wouldn't even normally bother them. And then you can automatically tell that they are emotionally triggered and they're trying to pick an argument with you. So I'm going to give you 5 tips on how not to get sucked into the rabbit hole of now your mood is being ruined, your day is being ruined, your evening's being ruined, and now you're getting stressed out and you're getting emotionally triggered because your partner is emotionally triggered. So the first step, number 1, is don't engage. So many times when your partner is feeling off, they're trying to get you into that entanglement of negative energy. And I want to let you know it is not your responsibility to support them by engaging in an argument with them. So the first thing you need to know about not engaging with them is that when they're emotionally triggered, nothing that you're saying is going to make sense to them. It's not going to, if you could normally have a rational conversation with them and they could be understanding and compassionate, when they're emotionally triggered, that's probably not the case. So I know a lot of times you try to, I'm just going to talk it out with them. No, if they're emotionally triggered and they're trying to pull you into a conversation, don't engage, okay? Don't try to rationalize anything. Just simply decide that you are going to do number 2, which is do not argue. Now, I'm going to let you know something that may or may not happen when you choose not to argue with your partner. They may go below the belt. So how many times have we been there where you feel like you're in a negative space and you're trying to get your partner to be in that same place, and you say things that you don't really mean because you're trying to get a reaction out of them, right? You're trying to get them to feel just as bad as you feel. So you say some things that you would never normally say, but it's because they're not engaging with you enough that you're like, you know what? I'm going to say some really hurtful below the belt things, and then they'll have no choice but to respond. So that is a tactic to get you to engage. Do not take the bait. Okay, I know that you can be thinking to yourself, how dare they? I can't believe. And you start to get so offended that you just want to do the same thing that they're doing with you, which is go below the belt and say hurtful things, and then you're going back and forth. If you think about the last time that that's happened, it doesn't even have to be in your current relationship, in another relationship in the past. If you thought back to the times where you both have said things that were below the belt, neither one of you feel great about it after the fact, right? So you both people regret saying those things, and sometimes you say things that you can't really take back. So that's why I say it's so important to not take the bait and to not get in that space. So the third thing I want you to do is to not try to prove your point by stating facts, by getting them to think rationally, because it doesn't matter. You just have to keep into your mind that they're emotionally triggered right now and they're trying to get in an argument with you. So even if everything that you're saying completely makes sense, they're not going to agree with you. They're not going to all of a sudden be like, oh yeah, you're right, because they still want you in the fight with them. So stating the facts is just going to cause you to get more frustrated, because have you ever been in a fight, an argument, a disagreement with your partner, and you start repeating yourself? Like it's almost like a record player and you're going back and forth. Like you're saying your point, your partner's saying their point, you're going back and forth and nobody, like you're getting nowhere, right? It's so exhausting and draining. I've literally done this for hours on end. Like I remember earlier in my journey, like before I learned these 5 rules, I would literally be like, if I could just state my point like a lawyer, if I could just state the facts, then I can get them to understand, and then I won't be feeling like I'm wrong. And that, no, it doesn't matter if you are completely right. They cannot hear you. They cannot understand you rationally because they're emotionally triggered. So you have to treat that as the primary filter. Like everything that you're saying is going through that filter of being emotionally triggered. So it's kind of like if you have something really positive and innocent to say, it has to get through all of that negativity, and they're somehow going to translate your good things into bad things, because it's like they're not at the place right now where they can literally rationalize and be like, okay, yeah, that does make sense, or maybe I'm overthinking this, or maybe I'm taking things the wrong way. Don't try to prove your point. Just don't. If you know that you're right about something in a relationship, it's not so much about who's right and who's wrong, but if you know that you're right, there's no need to prove yourself right to your partner because you're on the same team. So if one person loses, you both lose. So it's not about proving your point, and it's not going to make a difference in their mood. It's almost going to make it worse, because the more you try to prove your point and they even see that there's facts in it, the more they're going to push their negative point of view and say, no, it's not this because of this. And before you know it, you'll be saying the same thing in 25 different ways because you're so frustrated that they just don't get it. And at this time, they're not going to get it. But that doesn't mean that they're never going to get it. That doesn't mean that anything that you have to say to prove your point, you can't say later on. But when they're emotionally triggered, it's not filtering through them with the right lens, right? They have the lens of negativity. So don't take it personal. Anything that they're saying to get you emotionally aroused, to get you emotionally triggered, don't try to prove your point and just let that part of it go. Like if they say things that are below the belt, as painful and as hard as it may be, don't let it break the surface of the mood that you want to be in. So number 4 is understand that they are emotionally triggered. Everything that's going on with their negative mood has everything to do with them and nothing to do with you. I know a lot of times you may beat yourself up and say, oh, I should have said things this way, or I should have done things this way. But if you really think back, when you initially interacted with them, they were already in a mood, right? You didn't put them in that negative mood. They were already there. And it is not your job to pull your partner out of a funk. It's not your job to pull your partner out of a negative mindset. That is their responsibility. It's your responsibility to protect your positive energy. So if this happened when you first got home, this is a way that you can preserve your evening. You don't have to say, man, now I'm going to have a horrible evening because my partner's emotionally triggered. When you understand that they are emotionally triggered, you can do the 5th step, and that is give space and give grace. So what I mean by give space is you're probably not going to be able to be in the same space as your partner when they're emotionally triggered and be able to not engage with them, because they're constantly going to be saying or doing things that are going to provoke you. So I know in the past, a lot of times I have went and taken, if I lived with my partner and I noticed that this would happen, I would go take a walk. And the reason why I say that is because the more you don't engage, the more below the belt comments that they're going to make. And as soon as you let those comments pierce your spirit, pierce your soul, like get into your head, you're going to start feeling like, I'm not a punk. I need to say something back. How dare they talk to me like this? Like you're going to be feeling the need to defend yourself to your partner, right? You're going to be like, like if they can say stuff below the belt, I can say stuff below the belt, because that's when your ego gets involved. When your partner starts trying to get you to get in an argument and they're going below the belt, they're bruising your ego, and when your ego wants to come out to play, it's game on, because at that point you're not caring about what you're saying. You're not being compassionate of your partner. You're not making sure that you're staying within the boundaries of what's respectful and what's not. It's actually when your partner goes after you in that way and they're trying to get you to engage in an argument, it's almost like giving you permission to be disrespectful, right? It's giving you permission to drop all of the morals and the values that you may have in your relationship. You're like, oh, I guess we're not doing that right now. Like, have you ever felt like that? Like, when you normally interact with your partner, you're normally very respectful, you guys are very loving and all of these things, but when they start to get disrespectful with you, when they start to go below the belt, it's giving you permission to do the same thing. Like, you're like, oh, I don't have to be concerned about their feelings because they're not concerned about my feelings, so I guess we're just going there right now. But if you really think about that, you never feel good about yourself once you've told off your partner, once you've gone below the belt, once you've taken something that they told you in confidence and kind of said it to them in a mean and hurtful way. I know that I've been in situations where I was so emotionally triggered by my partner trying to provoke me into getting into an argument that I said things that I regretted later on and I couldn't take back. I remember I had a relationship where when we went to break up, they were still talking about comments that I made during a conversation that we had when we were both triggered. And it's like sometimes people can't get over that. Like, you can't take back those hurtful things that you say, and you want to maintain your character and your integrity. And in maintaining your character and integrity, I want to let you know you don't have to prove yourself to your partner, right? If your partner says all of these great things about you to other people and to you when you guys are on good terms, and then they start to say negative things, you don't have to prove yourself. You're the same person. Like, nothing about you changed. I used to be mind blown at, like, man, this person just said I was the best thing since sliced bread. And then the next time they got triggered, they said I was a piece of crap. And they talked to me like I was the scum of the earth. And I remember thinking, like, how is that possible? That is possible because when your partner is emotionally triggered, they're seeing everything through that lens of negativity, and that includes you. All of a sudden, everything that you do is super negative. They start looking at you and getting suspicious and getting jealous and getting insecure, and all of these negative emotions that are tied into a rabbit hole that they are going through. So when I say give space and give grace, what I mean is the only way that your partner is going to get out of that mindset is for you to give them space to do so. If you get in the ring with them and you're fighting with them, you're giving them permission to stay in that space because you're fueling that negative fire. You're fueling that negativity by continuously fanning the flame. It's a scientific term, so it's kind of like you're giving it more. Like, it's gonna die out. It's like a fire. You stop giving it energy, you stop giving it oxygen, it's going to eventually die out. But if you're constantly engaging in it, then that means your partner is giving effort to keep it alive. And you are giving effort because you're trying to, prove your point and do all these things. No, just let it go. When you give space and you give grace, the space part is removing yourself from the situation. Go for a walk, and then don't go for a walk and call your girlfriend or call someone and start talking about the issue that you're having, because then in turn you're keeping that alive. Like, you're letting that pierce your spirit, you're letting that get deeper into your mind. The more that you talk about something when you're in that peak state of those negative emotions where you're emotionally triggered, the worse it sounds, the worse it is, the more it gets ingrained in you. So when you leave that space with them and you go off and you start talking about it with your friends, and your friends start telling you, I can't believe he said that, or I can't believe she said that, and oh my God, I would never do, like, all of these things that a person would say, it makes you feel more justified to be negative right along with them. It puts a wall up. So every single time that you start talking about these negative interactions, you're building brick after brick after brick. And guess what? Those bricks are a wall in between you and your partner. And you're building that wall by consistently talking about, thinking about all of the negative things that they said when they were emotionally triggered. Don't worry about it. I know it's easier said than done, But when you're giving them that space, go do something that you enjoy. You will notice, I promise you, and this is something that you have to practice, you will notice how easy it is to not get emotionally triggered by your partner if you stop it in the beginning. Now, once you're in it and you start arguing with them, you start trying to prove your point, you start trying to do all these things to justify who you are and what you said and what it really meant and all of these things, you're building up that wall and you're saying, you know what, like you're in it with them. But if you stop it at the beginning and make a decision and be like, you know what, this is how I want to feel. I want to have a great evening. I want to, and you can make a decision that you want to have a great evening. And if your partner doesn't, that's okay. That is okay, because you can compartmentalize this situation and just say, you know what, this is just this evening, or this is just this day, and that's it. People have off days. That doesn't make them bad people. When they're emotionally triggered, the real issue is going to come out, and I guarantee you, when it comes out, it's going to be something that you both are going to be able to have a conversation with when you are both thinking rationally and when you are not emotionally triggered. If you think back to how many days that you've spent agonizing over not speaking to each other, replaying what the person said again and again and again, and the ego getting into it and being like, you don't need to talk to them. You know, like when you come back, if you've given them space and you've gone off and you've talked about the situation even more, and now you're even more mad about it. Like, you've ever done that where you're initially mad, but then you get finished talking about it even more, and then you're really mad, like you're big mad, because you're like, I really can't believe, and I really don't deserve this, and I really, 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 like all of these things. Then when you come back into their presence, it's almost like, I'm not talking to you. Because when I see you, all I can see are those negative things that you said about me, right? So even if your partner has somehow snapped out of it or they're ready to talk, you're all of a sudden, you're not ready to talk. You're like, oh, you want to talk to me now? Like, no. And then when you build that wall, it takes days and sometimes weeks for you guys to get to a point where you're actually getting to the core issue. You're getting to the core of what is really going on. So a way to not build that wall in between you and your partner is for you to give space and you to give grace, which means if they're emotionally triggered and they're coming at you, I want you to understand that they're probably hurting, right? They're probably hurting about something. Their ego's bruised. They're probably feeling insecure. Like there's some level of hurt that's attached to how they're treating you. And in order for you to even get to that point where you're like, what is really going on? You have to let them go through that process of being emotionally triggered by themselves. You're not able to pull them out of it, right? If they're trying to get you to go in it with them, they're not in a place where they're ready to talk about it. Give them a day, give them an evening, give them a couple of hours. And when your partner is not emotionally triggered anymore. You've seen when you guys have been fighting, right? Back and forth, you guys have been fighting, and one or the both of you are exhausted. We've all been there where we're both kind of like waving the white flag, like, okay, I'm done. Like, can we please talk about this? Or you're kind of like, I'm over it. We don't even need to talk about it. Like one person gets over it and the other person notices that they're over it and you guys just go on with life. Because some things, it's only that one person that was initially emotionally triggered. They just need to get through something. They need to play it in their head. They need to go through the motions. And once they do, then they'll be fine. They've regulated their emotions. They've done it on their own. And it may not cause for you guys to have to recount everything that happened. Because I've known so many times, even when you think that you're over it and you're like, okay, let's talk about what really happened, you end up going back over the scenario and getting re-triggered by talking about it again. And sometimes it's not about talking about what initially emotionally triggered you. It's about allowing the person to get through it, and then that's it. You don't have to talk about everything, every single thing that they said. And I know it's so hard to be like, oh, okay, well, you said this about me and you said this about me. Don't hold your partner accountable for the things that they said when they were emotionally triggered as a way of getting over it. Like, you can address it to them and say, hey, you crossed the line, you know, I didn't appreciate that. You can do that, but don't hold them accountable for it and think that that's going to be a way for you to move on. Address the core issue if you need to with them. But if not, if they regulated their emotions and they want to move on, if you never initially engaged in the argument, then you should be fine, right? So that's why the number 2 rule is don't argue, because that means you're not triggered. And when you're not triggered and you take a step back and you see that your partner's triggered, like, you're not in it, you're just kind of looking at them. You know what I mean? It's kind of like at a boxing match. When you see one person in the ring and they're shadow boxing, no one's getting hurt, right? No one's getting hurt if they're throwing jabs and there's no one else in the ring. The only time a person gets hurt is when you step in the ring with them. And now, them shadow boxing, them throwing them jabs, one of them are probably going to hit you, right? And when that one of those jabs hit you, then all of a sudden you're going back and forth, and now it's a full fight. Now you're going 9 rounds, 10 rounds, 13 rounds, you know, all of the things, because they have someone to fight with. No one's going to be able to keep that negative energy but for so long. And then once it's gone, you guys can move on, and you can save yourself from being in an argument that stresses you out, that makes you feel uncomfortable, that causes tension in your body, that causes you to not be able to do anything else well. Just take a step back, notice that they're triggered, and just be like, okay, they're not in the right space right now. I'm just going to go enjoy myself, and know that when they're ready, they will join you. I remember I had a person tell me this, and I was so offended, and I thought it was the most egotistical, cockiest thing I've ever heard someone say. But I wanted to get them into an argument because I really didn't agree with something, or I was emotionally triggered. And they said, I'm not going to engage in an argument with you. It's childish, and I'm not going to do it. And I was so offended. Like, I thought it was the rudest thing until I understood the science of it, until I understood that when they left, they were fine. And I had the ability to do the same thing. And what happened was, it left me alone to really deal with what was going on with me. And I want to tell you that it doesn't mean that you're not supporting your partner when you're giving them space to deal with what's really going on with them. Because if they really are in a place where they want to work with you over what's going on with their emotions in a respectful way, then they would just come to you and say, hey, I'm feeling this way. But if they don't come to you in a peaceful manner and say, hey, this is bothering me, then know that they're trying to get you in on the fight. And you don't have to think less of them, because we've all been there, right? So this is not for you to put yourself on a pedestal and say, I'm up here and you're down there because you're emotionally triggered. Because guess what? Next week, you could be the one that's emotionally triggered. And that's a completely different episode that I can give you information on what you can do when you're emotionally triggered, so that you don't impact your partner negatively. And so you guys don't waste time in this rabbit hole of arguing, not talking, things being awkward, because who knows what you all have planned, right? A lot of these times you're not emotionally triggered when it's convenient. A lot of times it's like, we're going to see someone, like we have all these things that we're supposed to be doing as a couple, but when one of us is emotionally triggered, like, now I have to go to this event, and freaking, I don't like you right now because you just said some things to me that are really hurtful, and now I have to go to this event. Like, it's never at a time that's convenient for you, but I want you to know that there is a way for one of you at some point in your relationship are going to have to be the person that's going to say, no, I'm not going to do this. I love you, but I'm going to talk to you later. And it's not a F you, whatever, you're Mr. Negative Nancy or Negative Nelson. It's not like that. It's just, I'm not wanting to go into that space right now. I have a friend that's really proper, and she's like, I'm not available for that right now, for that space. And there's nothing wrong with having those boundaries. And granted, they may blow up your phone, they may send the negative text message. Do not engage. That's number one. When I say do not engage, That means text message too, because I've been there where it's like, I'm not talking to you, but then you text me, and then we get in this text war back and forth because you said something negative, then I said something and then we're going back and forth. It's almost like we're in person. And I want to let you know that when you are texting back and forth and it's super negative like that, like your emotions are just as affected as if you were in person. You can process everything via text message the same way you could as if they were saying those words in your ear or to your face. Don't do it. I would suggest that you don't look at your phone, that you go do something else where you're not constantly hearing those notifications go off and saying super negative, seeing those super negative things, because your brain can process those words on text almost even more, because it's not just you say the words, they're in your ear and that's it. When you have text messages, you can go back and look at those texts and look at those texts and look at those texts and get re-triggered and re-triggered. And it's like fueling the fire, because now you have the ability to go hours and days of looking at the negative, nasty things that they said to you. And you're just at a point where you're like, I can't believe. And it never lets you out of that rabbit hole of seeing those negative things and getting out of that negative space, because you can constantly replay it. You don't even have to replay it in your mind. You can just scroll up in a text message and look. I've done that before. I've kind of been in a place where I was ready to get over it and I was ready to move forward, but I looked at the long paragraph dissertations of text messages with all the negative stuff, and it made me re-infuriated even more. So what I say is, it's the same thing like in person. Nobody can fight by themselves. If you don't engage in a text conversation back with them, they're going to eventually stop texting you because you're not engaging in that conversation while they're being super negative. They're going to accuse you of all of these things to try to get you to argue with them, but you do not have to. That is not the way that you can support your partner. You can support your partner by giving space and giving grace. So I really hope that these 5 ways to avoid an argument with your partner have helped you. You can always reach out to me on Instagram at bryce_with_rose. And then also book a session with me. And if you're at a point where you kind of really need to practice, get into that practice mode, this is what I do with a lot of my clients. We have to do this scenario based because it's easy for me to tell you and you're not in the situation because it's not second nature, right? Second nature, because it's something that you've been doing so long, is as soon as you're emotionally triggered, as soon as you feel that your partner's emotionally triggered, you respond back. And that's when you reach a point where you have so many regrets because you realize that you had a turning point and you made the wrong turn. So if you're wanting to get to a place where you stop making the wrong turn in your relationship and you want to avoid having these stressful, draining arguments with your partner, then reach out to me. That is all for today.